The lecture is going to be about heavy metal seance, but hopefully it will encourage and inspire you to create what you want to create. I thought it might be helpful to just kind of walk through how it happened, how it was set up, how everything came about, and kind of the progression of it. So starting out, this is something I never thought I would do, frankly. I did not know where the venue would be, if an audience would be there, or where it would ever happen. But one thing I don't think I've talked about in front of you guys before, most of you know me or know of me at least, I used to play in metal bands. So I've always been big into heavy metal music and playing in bands, and I still have contacts with some of those guys, some of them who have gone on to make a whole lot of money playing music, but one of them came back to Arkansas, and he now runs most of the venues as far as booking. And he called me, and one of the venues where we played out when we were teenagers, he said, "Hey man, I'm doing all their booking. I want to do something besides just music. What do you have?" And I went, "Well, I got a heavy metal seance." And he went, "Okay, great, awesome, you're booked." So that was pretty much how it happened. Yeah. So why this show? So basically, seeing this stuff, this was my childhood. When I was a kid, the things I loved the most were heavy metal music, I loved art, and playing in bands. That was most of my childhood. And one thing that I chatted with David Parr about, that he's talked about, and I do the same thing, I really love mining my childhood. What made me happy? What made me excited when I was young? And how can I do that now? How can I use that in my shows? And on top of that, I really wanted a show where I could dress like this, because this is how I dress every day. And most of the time when I perform, I'm in a suit and a button-up. So it was nice to get to do a show just casually dressed, but yet it looks like a costume that's perfect for it. And part of my childhood, though, wasn't just the heavy metal music and the art and all of that, but my dad was a Southern Baptist preacher. So as you can imagine, he was not happy with the heavy metal music. He was not happy with any of this imagery. And one thing that stood out in my mind so very clearly was we had a touring group of, there were two brothers and they were preachers, and they came to the church and they set up a giant, it was in the days before PowerPoint, so I'm really impressed at however they did it. Lots of slideshows, I guess, with the big carousels or whatever, but they had a whole presentation on heavy metal music and how it was evil and satanic. And they're playing the songs, and as they're playing the songs, I'm singing along, and my dad was so angry. His son knows all of these evil satanic words. But that was something that really stood out in my mind, and I wanted to tap into that. But then another part of it, when you're raised by a Southern Baptist, the devil's real. I mean, that's real, that's scary stuff. So I always had this weird back and forth, like Slayer's down there, right there. I love Slayer. Still do love Slayer, but they're satanic. So I always had this kind of back and forth tension. Should I listen to this? It's wrong, but that's why I should do it, right? And so I really wanted to recapture it. And that's why this show was something that always kind of stuck in my mind. And then finally, one other thing is that the West Memphis Three, if you're not familiar with them, I'm sure most of you are, they were accused of doing a ritualistic satanic killing of 3 little boys, and they went to prison for a long time until just a couple of years ago. Well, that was in Arkansas. West Memphis is in Arkansas. They were my age. This all happened when I was that age. And as somebody who wore heavy metal shirts and listened to music, and I thought, this is crazy. This could be me so easily. So all of this stuff was really strong growing up. These were omnipresent factors in my life. So I wanted to recapture some of that. Now, I'll talk about this. I don't want that to play yet. Let me back it up just a sec. I forgot I got it to autoplay. Part of what I wanted to do, if I wanted to have my audience understand what that time period was like, if I wanted them to get a feel for how it was when I grew up, I realized that a lot of people in my audience did not grow up in that time period, because unless they were my age and into some of the same things I were, they probably didn't realize how real Satanism was in the 80s. Geraldo Rivera specials on it, newspaper articles on it. I mean, this stuff was real. And it sounds crazy when you look back at it. So I structured my seance in a really different way. It was not a traditional what you would think of as seance. My first 20 minutes of it was basically a brief lecture along with video on satanic panic in the 80s. And it covered more than just heavy metal music. And I started with a video because I like being able to incorporate different things, not just talking and not just pictures. And so this is the video that...
You have to give a blood sacrifice to Satan. It's supposed to keep you protected. It's supposed to keep you pure.
They said that if we told that the devil would come and kill our parents.
It doesn't matter if you believe in Satan. It doesn't matter if you believe in demons. What's important is to know that there are people out there that do, and they're willing to do anything to accomplish their goal.
Satanism is more than a hodgepodge of mysticism and fantasy, more than a Halloween motif. It's a violent impulse. It preys on the emotionally vulnerable, especially teenagers, often lonely and lost.
It basically started out like the killing of animals. Then there's always that heavy metal music and drugs don't help.
It attracts the angry and the powerless, who often sink into secret lives.
They asked me if I had ever thought about killing somebody just to watch them die. And they asked me if I would like to join a satanic cult.
Possessed by an obsessive fascination with sex and drugs, and yes, heavy metal rock and roll.
Satan's child.
Often Satanism seems to be a personal psychodrama, a kind of license for strange, sometimes violent behavior.
A bloodbath would be a cleansing and purification of a planet that has been dirtied and degraded for too long.
Sometimes it's just half-baked mumbo-jumbo and scrawled symbols, but other times it goes deeper, deadly.
Tommy died as brutally as his mother did, but at his own hands.
I loved him dearly, but he also took my wife who I loved.
Satanism goes far beyond teenage obsession. Today there are cults that worship the devil, engage in secret ceremonies, believe in ancient, though bizarre theology, all of it constitutionally protected, as long as no laws are broken.
I believe that hate is necessary in a controlled way just as much as love is necessary.
The other face of adult Satanism is violent and fiendish, centered on sexual ritual and torture, frequently descending into the vilest crime of all, sexual abuse of children.
He has drawn pictures of child being sacrificed. He's talked about animal sacrifices. He's disclosed molestation.
And what of their own children? Some are born into satanic cults and grow up as lifelong members. Others are desperate to flee, but dread the penalty of grotesque death.
They're going to catch me, it don't matter. I could run and run and run. They're always going to catch me because they're all over.
And beyond the mayhem and monsters, it's said that a nationwide network of satanic criminals exists. Start with the warped and wicked Charles Manson.
It's everything that human beings don't understand. It's all their fears. It's what they're not sure of. You dig what I'm saying? Satan to me would be God.
Or the demented son of Sam killer David Berkowitz. These and others, purportedly linked to the devil worship underground.
Where's Satan?
Yeah, Satan. Yeah, Satan.
It's all over the United States and probably all over the world because it's just something that people are experimenting with now.
Impossible to measure, easy to doubt. The very mention of it invites ridicule.
Come out. No, I won't let her go. No.
Often the choice is to avoid confronting it, ignore it, find other explanations, or laugh it off.
All right, so that's where the video ends. So what I explained to people, granted, yeah, it looks absolutely ridiculous. I didn't pick these clips. This was from a Geraldo Rivera special. And that's what I point out to people. This is a respected journalist. And this was on major networks. Well, okay. At least a well-known. How about that? But, my point was to show people, like, this stuff was on TV. And it wasn't, some crazy, this is what people believed. Now, I'm going to go on and kind of talk about some of the inspiration. And while I am going to go through more details of the seance itself, I want you guys to think about, as you're listening to this, going back to what inspired me as a kid, what excited me as a kid, and I want you to think about what you might want to do when you want to start creating your show. So I thought, you can talk in theory about inspiration, but I figured by kind of sharing mine, this is a case study, so to speak, it might help demonstrate a little more clearly how you can use this stuff for your own. So my first one is, and this was the inspiration for this show specifically, not my childhood inspiration, but when I started thinking about the show, what do I want to create? The first one is Rob Zombie. If you guys aren't familiar with him, you know, if you've never been to a Rob Zombie concert, you ought to go. I'm not even a huge fan of Rob Zombie. It's the best show I've ever seen. I mean, just an incredible stage performance, big animatronics and puppets. He's also an artist, does cartoons. He's got cartoon visuals and all kinds of crazy, awesome crap. His shows are great. And another thing I appreciated about him is I really think he's taken his weird horror world and created the world that he wants around him. And I think that's awesome. I really do respect that. So that was the first one. The second one was Ghost. And if you guys aren't familiar with these guys, I think you ought to check them out too. In fact, we had a conversation just the other day about Ghost. One of my favorite bands, they're a Swedish, they say heavy metal. I wouldn't really call them heavy metal. Great music, but very theatrical, very over the top. So I wanted to create, obviously, some of that theatricality and just over the topness of the seance itself. And then finally, Slayer. Love Slayer, always have. They're real intense. I like that. So not talking too much about the inspiration part, but I started thinking about what I liked best in the heavy metal world to use that to create, to I guess give my framework for what I wanted to show my audience as I performed. Now I'm going to share really specific stuff with you as well, so you can kind of see how this came together. The first thing that I had to have was a story, right? I mean, if you're doing a seance, what's the story? And it's real easy to create one in this instance because I just pulled it out of the headlines of the time. It's not based on any one person, but my story is that there is this band here called Blood Sacrifice. I created the logo and it's totally made up, but I did a glossy, 8x10 picture of them. And the story is that they were just there, almost there, making their way to the top, being a big band, and still just playing mid-level clubs when a teenager was found dead in the singer's dressing room. There were candles around him. The singer was arrested, and they said that it was a satanic ritual, a sacrifice, so that they could become famous. The singer denied all of it and said, the kid killed himself in my dressing room. It was crazy. I was on stage when it happened. But the singer ended up being arrested, prosecuted for the murder, went to jail. Now, there were a few other things that I did to really have fun with it. Again, I told you I used to play in metal bands, so I had friends in that still play. And one of my friends created a song by Blood Sacrifice, and I had a cassette single, and I had to find a cassette player so that I could play it, because of course he did it all digitally. But I told him I wanted it to sound like old Venom, which if you're familiar with Venom, you'll know, and if not, it was really bad production value and really kind of crappy music, but they still became huge nonetheless within the world of metal. And then I wanted my marketing to be a little bit different too. So this on the left looks like a lot of the old posters that bands used to do. You kind of cut and paste stuff together and make photocopies and stick it up on doors. I used that same image and that same look to actually promote the show. I stuck it in music venues all around Little Rock. And I know it caught a lot of eyes because now all the posters are colored and glossy and fancy, and then they're like, ooh, what's this old thing? So it was really a fun and different way to market. So not only did I create this backstory and the song, I also did a video clip, which for whatever reason I can't find it. I think it's probably on a hard drive that I didn't get. But anyway, I made two different commercials. One of which looked very similar to what you guys just saw. That was an ad that I did on YouTube to promote the show. And another one, the guy who booked me, CT, he looks like a rough old grizzled metal guy. He spent a lot of time, going singing. So when he talks now, he talks like this. We went to North Little Rock jail and they let us use a jail cell, so I interviewed him as the singer of the band who was jailed. So we didn't I can't find that video, it's somewhere. So I used that too to do some marketing. So it was a lot of fun kind of putting all this stuff together. I did all kinds of stuff. I did an old, like an old zine from back in the days and just used it page for page, but then recreated an article about blood sacrifice and did their pick. I went way overboard because it was a lot of fun just creating all of the story. And a lot of that I didn't use in the show itself. I actually just used it as material that was sitting around. It just, to me, helped build the myth of the band. Just looking at my notes. Oh yeah, I also did guitar picks. I gave everybody that came to the show got a guitar pick with their logo on it. Just had fun with stuff. Yeah. So moving on, this is what the actual stage set looked like. This is the club. I'll point out, this is my screen where I could project on. This is the stage itself, and so they wanted me at first to be on the stage, but I didn't want to do that because I wanted this to. I did not promote or market this as a show, so I wanted it to feel as real as it possibly could. And I thought if I'm on stage, to me, that clearly marks it as a show. Granted, people still believe what you do is real, but if I'm not on stage, closer to my people. And so this was the head table where I put 6 people around, and then all of the other tables were, from that red table to this chair in a semicircle. So everybody was very, very close, and everything was very close. I know it's hard to see in the picture, but that right there, those are PBR bottles that I use for candle holders, because I thought that would be more fitting for a metal club than having anything fancy. But most of it, as you can see, it's just a bunch of candles, and they're set all up on their monitors and speakers. And so I really didn't do much. The atmosphere of a metal club is perfect for a heavy metal seance. So the venue alone kind of created the set, so to speak. So moving forward, I want to talk about the structure of the show a little bit. I said that the first part was kind of a lecture, basically. So I had the show divided up into 3 20-minute segments. That's just part of how my mind is. I like things to, eventually that could be 666, right? But I just like the 3 parts of shows. I do that a lot. And I wanted each of them to be 20 minutes in length so they weren't too terribly long. And the first part did begin with, as they came in, I'd already picked all of the music that I wanted as my pre-show music that were all based on the PMRC and the Dirty 30 back then. So, I get way into the details. I really like that. But I started by welcoming everyone, showing that video, and then I'm going to share with you guys. You don't need to see a bunch of tricks because you've got them, but I'll share with you what I would then present to people. And it was an overview about Satanism. Aside from the video, it was this. So I wanted to give people the background of where Satanic Panic came from so that they really understood it. And it started with this book. It was called Michelle Remembers, and it was written in 1980. And this started the whole idea of satanic ritual abuse. Before this book, that idea did not even exist, satanic ritual abuse. We went out for some, there we go, we're back up. So there was a guy named Lawrence Pastor who wrote that book, and he was a psychologist, and he did hypnosis and did kind of, the old memories, recovering past memories from this girl named Michelle. Michelle claimed that when she was a kid, she was abused as part of a satanic ritual. And it's all outlined in this book. It was a bestseller. Of course it was huge. But when you think about it, like why would this girl have any reason to lie? Now I do want to point out that when Lawrence Pastor wrote this book and interviewed Michelle for the book, Michelle was no longer a little girl. This was all hypnosis and past memories. Michelle was at that time early 20s. Mr. Pastor was in his 50s, and they ended up getting married. So yeah, no incentive to lie, right? It became, again, a bestseller, made him hugely well-known, started a whole field of psychology and the idea of ritualistic satanic abuse, so it was massive. And then it was completely discredited, of course, because there was never any evidence whatsoever of any satanic ritual abuse. But this is where it started. And this is where it got crazy. I'm not going to read the quote to you on the screen, but that quote was actually from one of the prosecutors. That was said much later, obviously. But the next real thing was the McMartin's preschool case. Now this, to me, really got crazy. Like, how could anyone believe this? It started with one kid, one child, who claimed that he was being abused in the preschool. He claimed things like the preschool teachers were levitating, that they took him on broom rides, that they were holding satanic rituals in their basement. There was no basement for the preschool, by the way. Crazy stuff. So his mom called the police. Now, what came out later was that his mom was both an alcoholic and schizophrenic, so maybe she made up the stories, who knows. But the police didn't really handle it in a good manner either. They decided that they would send notices to all of the parents to say, hey, your kids may have been satanic ritually abused. So what do you think the parents did? They freaked out, of course. They started asking their kids, and then I'm sure the kids were like, oh yeah, we did go on a broom ride flight because Tommy said we did, or whatever. And the stories just got crazier and crazier. So the police decided to run with this. So the kids said they saw, I covered that, like employees fly. So they arrested 4 different people. Ultimately, this woman, who is Miss McMartin, was accused of being the ringleader of the whole satanic cult. Doesn't she look horribly evil? Her son, those were the 2 who really were prosecuted hard and heavily. This trial went on for 6 years. and no one was ever convicted. Not a single person, because there was not a shred of proof that there was any satanic ritual abuse, because of course there wasn't. It was and still is the most expensive trial in American history. This trial, trying to prosecute these people for ritualistic satanic abuse. So going on to the next one, here's where it starts to tie in with heavy metal. Horror films really started to inspire some of the earliest heavy metal bands, both thematically and lyrically. And this movie was one of the first ones that inspired the first kind of heavy metal band. Does anyone know who it might be, the band? Now you know?
Black Sabbath.
Black Sabbath, right. Black Sabbath took that name. That movie was actually called Black Sabbath. That was the movie poster for it. It's an Italian film. They really liked what they saw in it. So they started incorporating those kind of lyric and again, imagery into their shows. And that, of course, inspired all of the other bands. So in the 1980s, there was also this real push to get rid of this dirty music, right? If you were alive then, or well, I think everyone was alive then. If you remember it, Tipper Gore started the PMRC, the Parents Music Resource something, whatever the C stood for. And they're the ones that first did the explicit lyric labels on albums. That started with her, trying to clean up this dirty music. And she picked a group called the Filthy 15, and these were like the worst of the worst. These were the worst bands. It's kind of funny, some of them. Now the first was King Diamond. If you're not familiar with King Diamond, he's Danish. He was the singer of Merciful Fate. He did claim, still does claim, to be a practicing Satanist. He might be the only one that would accurately fit her list. The next one, Motley Crue. Yes, horribly evil. Most of their songs are about sex and motorcycles, but whatever, because they're just filthy. It doesn't have to be evil. The next one that hit it was AC/DC. I don't know why they decided they were so filthy. I think it's because they have some songs about sex. I'm sure that Tipper Gore never had sex. The next one is Twisted Sister. Yeah, I really don't get that one. They were more, to me, outlandish and ridiculous, and they were evil or filthy. Def Leppard, that's a strange one to me too. I'm not really sure what made them so bad. Then you had Wasp. People claim that stood for We Are Sexual Perverts. I don't think it actually did. They did have some songs that were pretty explicit, so that's where they came in. Oddly, Madonna, she made the list. Yeah, she was on Tipper Gore's Filthy 15, so one of the worst performers out there is Cyndi Lauper. Yeah. Horrible, horrible people here. So this gives you an idea of kind of how things were then. Now, an interesting thing, the guy that was in Twisted Sister, we'll go back to him in case you're not familiar with him. This guy right here, Dee Snider, who had ridiculous hair, and it's hard to tell, that little picture, wore makeup all the time. He actually testified before Congress during this era about how the music was not bad, it was not evil. It's actually really eloquent and well-spoken. So just interesting aside there.
As did Frank Zappa.
Yeah, Frank Zappa did too, yep. So here's Ozzy, and I mean, how can you think this is anything but just pure goofy to me? I mean, this is not evil, this just looks silly. But this started he started the next wave of the persecution of heavy metal, so to speak. So there was a boy named John McCollum who committed suicide while listening to an Ozzy song called Suicide Solution. The interesting thing is that Suicide Solution was actually not about suicide. It was about how if you don't stop with your drinking and drugs, you're going to kill yourself. So it wasn't about killing yourself. But nonetheless, his family sued Ozzy, saying that he caused McCollum to kill himself. We actually discussed this case in law school, and I remember a girl in front of me going, well, yeah, anyone who listens to that music's probably suicidal anyway. And I was just kind of like, anyway. That was the first. Of course, the court said that Ozzy has a First Amendment right to say whatever he wants. You can't sue somebody because of the lyrical content. So the next one in the series was Judas Priest. There were a pair of friends that got drunk and high, and they shot themselves with shotguns, killed themselves. Now, what they claimed, this was the first of the subliminal messages lawsuits. They claimed that if you played one of their songs backwards, it said, do it, do it, do it. Now, how that is related to suicide and not sex, I don't know, but you would think that there would be a stronger argument for that, or else that they were corporate shills for Nike, right? But nonetheless, they got sued for do it, do it, do it. Now, there is an interesting thing here I want to share with you guys. See if this auto plays. If not, I'll get it started, if I can. Because I want you to see this. This is the lead singer of Judas Priest testifying in court.
Better by you, better than me. You can say what I only can see.
Thank you. is the exhalation of breath.
Yes.
Is that a normal part of your singing?
That's the way I've always sung. This is my style.
Is there some effect that has for the aesthetics of the song?
It's just the words performed, the emotion involved and the feeling that you give out when you're singing it.
Are there subliminal duets on the Better By You, Better Than Me song?
Absolutely not.
All right. So that's kind of odd, a metal guy singing in court. And I don't know if you noticed, it said Sue Ellen, whoever, lawyer for Judas Priest. That's the one legal milestone I've never hit yet. I wanted to say Paul Prater, lawyer for Judas Priest. That would be awesome. But yeah, this was so serious, they put him on the stand. They tried these cases. It's incredible to me as a lawyer that these could even get to trial. I don't see how these are not dismissed well ahead of that. But yeah, you have Rob Halford singing and testifying that there are not subliminal do-it messages. Of course, the outcome was the same. That is constitutionally protected activity. Even if it does say do it backwards, it doesn't matter. You can do that kind of stuff. The next one were these guys. And so these guys were 3 teenagers, and they killed a girl. They were in a metal band themselves. I can't remember the name of their metal band. Let me see if I got it noted here.
Blood Sacrifice.
What was it?
Blood Sacrifice.
Blood Sacrifice, probably. No, they were called Hatred, okay? So they claimed that, or thought, that if they killed this girl, then it was a sacrifice to Satan, that they would become a famous metal band. Now, if you saw the movie Jennifer's Body, it was loosely based on this actual case, where the band kills the girl so that they can become famous singers. And these guys claim to be huge fans of Slayer, and they said that Slayer encouraged it. So the parents of the girl who was killed sued Slayer, saying that Slayer's lyrics made those 3 boys kill somebody else. So it's pretty far-fetched too. And as you can guess, again, there was a First Amendment, it was protected. Now what they claim though, I like the argument. I don't really like it, but I thought it was clever. Since courts had already twice held there's a First Amendment right to say whatever you want in your music, clearly that was not going to cut it. They couldn't sue on the same basis. So they claimed that the music was inherently evil. So it's not the lyrical content, just the music itself was so evil it can cause people to kill other people. Crazy. Of course, they did not win that because that's ridiculous. But that was the last of it. Now, I talked about the heavy metal and some of the lawsuits, and what happened?
Satan.
Probably.
Yeah.
Takes in control of your TV.
Metal and dark powers, dude.
All right. Well, that's all right. I'll continue forward. There's some pictures here, but that's all right. I can continue forward. So there were, during this time period, some actual murders, though, that were linked to Satanism. And so that's where they really started to tie in. The first is a guy who you can't see. You can pretend he's up there. His name's Sean Sellers. He has a horrible, bowl-cut mullet thing. But he killed a gas station clerk, and then a few weeks later killed his family. Now, in the jail, once he got to jail, of course, he had a conversion to Christianity and then claimed it was all Satan that made him do it. Because that's a good way to, Satan's the scapegoat, and that way you don't have to claim personal responsibility for the evilness that you've done, right? Of course, the one thing that they didn't like to mention a lot is that Sean Sellers was a horrible drug addict, so I'm sure that had nothing to do with the murders, right? And then the next one was Richard Ramirez. Yeah, the Night Stalker. I'm sure you guys are familiar with him. He really put kind of Satanism on the map. He terrified everyone. And then at his trial, you saw the clip earlier, he shows his hand with a pentagram on it, says, "Hail Satan." So yeah, people kind of freaked out about that one. But then the next one that I had up here is a guy named Ricky Casso. Now, he didn't claim to be inspired by heavy metal or by Satan or anything else. Him and another guy got into a fight over 13 bags of stolen PCP, and he shot the guy, but he was wearing an AC/DC shirt when he was arrested. So clearly, it was the music, nothing to do with any of the drugs. So those were kind of the 3 murders that got pinned on it, and then the next one finally are the West Memphis 3, of course. And these guys, if you don't know their story, I'm sure most of you do, but I'll make it short. There were 3 kids, one of whom was borderline retarded. They were accused of taking these 3 little kids, into a wooded area and ritualistically killing them for Satan. Now, most of that, totally unsubstantiated. There was no physical evidence at all. It was all, there we go. All right, we'll skip forward. There's the West Memphis 3. And it was all based primarily on scant evidence, no physical evidence. But the main thing that convicted him was this guy in the middle. He's the one who was barely, just had an IQ barely above being really really incapacitated, basically. And he gave a confession. This confession was full of errors, full of facts that were not accurate, but all that was ignored by the prosecution. They brought in a satanic expert who is an expert in satanic ritual abuse, who testified that this was clearly a satanic killing. That guy, turns out, got an online degree in satanic ritual specialization or whatever. So yeah, they really didn't have anything. And these guys were in prison until just about 3 or 4 years ago. And recent DNA tests have shown that perhaps it was one of the stepfathers who actually killed those kids, and there's no DNA putting any of them at the scene. So, where are we now in the world of satanic ritual abuse? It's gotten really weird. So, the FBI itself has said, now assuming you believe the FBI, if not, then I can't help you there, but they have said there has been no evidence ever of one single case of satanic ritual abuse. There's been no evidence ever of any satanic organizations out committing crimes. There's no conspiracy of Satanists. So that's what you got there. The next one is Myrtle's still around, but the satanic murders seem to have stopped. So I guess it's not Myrtle, huh? No one's been killed in the name of Satan recently because of heavy metal. But one of the weird ways it has moved into is MK Ultra. And I'm not going to get into that, but if you guys aren't familiar with MK Ultra, you ought to look it up. The basic idea is that there's government mind control that's teaching kids how to be agents for the government when certain keywords are released. And apparently if you watch, Katy Perry is one of them, Rihanna's one of them, and if you watch the videos you can see all the evidence, so people claim. So interesting, that's kind of where ritualistic satanic abuse has gone. So, to step back out of this role now, this is how I started the Seance. So it was, kind of a fun, interactive, learning stuff. And now I want to walk through kind of what I did. I'm not going to perform everything, but I'm going to walk through the stuff that I did. So after I did that part, I wanted to have kind of what I told people is we're going to now do some psychic tests. I'm going to have 6 of you seated at my table, and I need to see which 6 would be the best. So I got to work with a lot more people before I moved 6 up. And the first, it says everyone with threads. What that means is I would just go through I want you to imagine that there are threads from the center of the ceiling going out to each and every one of us, connecting to our heads. And those threads allow the free transference of thought and energy back and forth with all of us. So that's a little bit more into it, but that tells you what the everyone with threads is, to kind of get them prepared to work together. Now the finger test is one I actually do at corporate shows too. I think it's a lot of fun, and I will demonstrate this one because there's 2 of them. The first one you guys are probably familiar with, so I won't do that, but the idea of here and magnets are on your fingertips and they're pulling together. Anyone not familiar with that? Okay, good, everyone's familiar with it, so we won't do that. Here's the second one though that I like. So I want you to put your hands together in prayer position like so. We're now about to start our satanic, and then I said, no, I'm kidding, we're not doing that. I want you to look at your fingertips, look at your middle fingers, and notice that most likely they're the same length, more or less. One finger is not longer than the other, and they all line up. That means that you're pretty normal, sorry. But now look at your dominant hand, whichever hand that is. Really pay attention to the lines, look closely at the lines in that dominant hand, and imagine as you look at it, that it keeps growing, that it's flattening out, that it's getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Imagine that it's just growing. Those fingertips are growing up towards the ceiling, longer and longer. And in just a moment, we're going to say grow, grow, grow 3 times with me. Let's do it. 1, 2, 3, grow, grow, grow. Continue thinking about it flattening out, getting bigger. The fingers getting longer. Now put those hands together and take a look. Oh yeah, I see some faces and hear some laughs. So some people have a longer finger now, right? Yeah, so that's what I did. And corporate shows always that. If you really believe I can make your middle finger grow longer, I've got a special package where I can make any part of your body grow bigger, $500 maybe at the show. So I didn't do that at the Satanic show. Didn't figure that went well. So we started with that to see kind of, what I said is this is to see how suggestible you guys are. It's not a big deal. If we can get it fixed, that's fine. If not, it's not a big deal. But the next thing that I did was something with ESP cards. And I'll share it with you guys. It's pretty simple, and it went over really, really well, and I enjoyed it because there was a magician there who I used his wife for this part, and then he was like, what the hell did you do? So it was really easy. I brought up 2 people, because when I work with things, I really like the idea of kind of proving through another spectator that what I'm doing is legit. So they're marked ESP cards, something you guys are all familiar with, and I would have the person on my left hold up some of the cards and look at them and imagine that she could send those symbols to me. And of course I can pick them up because they're marked on the back and I'm looking at the marking. And then I would try to do some with her to see if she could pick up on any of them. And every now and then people hit, and that's really cool, but most of the time they don't. So you're showing this is legit. I like to build the legitimacy of it. So then the person over here, imagine we're sitting at a table, as you guys saw earlier, and there's a tablecloth on it. So you can't see anything, below waist. And I told her, I want to explain these symbols to you. The circle is 1. Does that make sense? And she said, yes. The cross is 2. You get it? That's 2. Yes. The wavy lines are 3, squares 4. I explain each of it. In just a moment, I'm going to look at some of these images and see if I can send them to you. Now, different people pick up on things in different ways. You might see an image, or it might come to you as a number. I want you to be aware of anything, completely open to it, anything you might feel or experience. So one more time, just to be clear, the circle is 1. Does that make sense? Yes. Cross is 2. Makes sense? So on. Now what I did that second time around, when I said I want to make sure we're clear, I moved my foot on hers and said the circle is 1 and tapped her foot. Does that make sense? Yes. The cross is 2. Does that make sense? So I'm cueing her and getting her prepared, because I did find when I practiced it, sometimes when you hit someone's foot, they pull it away thinking it was an accident. So I had to make sure that she didn't pull her foot away and understood the numbering system. But we went through that. It's so simple. It worked phenomenally well. And so if you want to use it for something. And then the next one that I have is tarot test. There's actually a marked set of tarot cards that I use. And I just did a 1 tarot card reading. And in fact, is Vic in here?
He's upstairs.
Okay, well, he has a few of or at least one of those sets left, if you're interested. Tell him they're the ones that I sent you to go get, that he doesn't know what they are. You bought them? Okay, good. Yeah, I told him I use those all the time, and he said, I don't know what they are. So I bought one of the sets. Anyway, they're great. I love them. Anyway, the next one was a living and dead test with a name and a pendulum. Now, I do try to pick audience members, and I'm sure most of you do, that I think will react well to things, who will really work with me. And so I wanted to do the living and dead test by using someone who I thought would not be too sensitive, but maybe react well. Because I asked her to think of someone who had passed away during her lifetime. And what I also had her do was write the name down. And I used the pendulum to divine which card it was, and then I told her the name. At this point, I was surprised she actually started crying. And I was like, are you okay? She goes, oh yeah, just great memories. That's so awesome. I felt like you really made contact with her. So yeah, that was a great way to start. The first one I did. And I do that routine a lot. If you guys aren't familiar with the working of it, it's basically Sneak Thief by Larry Becker. You guys familiar with the workings of that? So I just do it with I don't have my business cards on me. 5 business cards. You can nail nick one, however you want to do it. I think I used actually what I do is I've got strip cards. One is stripped. So it doesn't matter. They write the name down, mix them up, hand them back to me, and I can just strip it right out, move it to the bottom. So when I turn over the top card and show it's blank, I'm looking right at the name. So that's the method for it. So super simple, really easy. And then the next one was a pendulum bottle test. And if you guys haven't done one of these, I think you ought to. And what that is was a pendulum inside a bottle. So it's just in the cork, so no one can get to it. Obviously, you can't blow on it. But if you get 3 people around a table, like that one might be a little too heavy, but if you get 3 people around a table and have them just put their hands on that table and you coach them to focus and move that thing, it will move. It's awesome. I absolutely love it. I did it every week in shows for 18 months when I ran weekly shows, and often it'll move so much it'll hit the side of the bottle and so people can hear it just clanging against the glass. And it's just suggestion, just like a Ouija board works in the same way, and the pendulum bottles use it. It doesn't sound like it's possible, but it's awesome. It's really strong. So that was what we did just to test the audience. And from there, I picked my 6 to come up and join us at the main table. And at that point, I think my remote just died. That's all right. I moved into the Seance probably. And so I'll kind of walk through what this was. The first one was, it says cards of kids. I know that was basically an out of this world routine using kids, but I didn't like it. So I ended up actually taking that out, but this was just my early set list I wanted to share. The next one, multiple outs, that's, I told you I created these things with the band, like pics and articles and pictures. It was a deal where I like to call it not really multiple outs, but every item they select, there's a way to show, oh, that was the item that you should have selected that's specifically tied to this person. So I did that, and people got to kind of look at the stuff and play with it, and there's no forcing with that. The next one that I had, oh, it's back, okay. The next one that I had was, I said Cliff Burton board. So I'll kind of give you the setup for this. I wanted a few pieces that were from this kid, you know, who had killed himself or what have you. And I also like to minimize my props. If I can use fewer props but have more use of them, I really like that. So when people came in, I had an amaze box. And if you guys aren't familiar with the amaze box, it's like an origami box, basically, but you can force things. It's like a switch box. It's awesome, and it's just cardboard, so it looks innocent. And I had people write down the names of their favorite dead musicians and drop them in, each person as they came in, and so this thing's full of slips. And of course, when the person goes to select whatever name, it forces Cliff Burton. So the person already has Cliff Burton. So I told the story. Cliff Burton was the bass player for Metallica, if you guys aren't familiar. He was thrown out of a bus, and the bus flipped over and killed him in a bus wreck in Sweden, I think. But my story that tied in with all of it is that this kid who sacrificed himself or was murdered, whichever one you choose to believe, actually met, because it was all set in California. He'd met Cliff Burton before Metallica was big. He felt like he slighted him, he hated him. So it's kind of fun on the back of the Ouija board. There's Cliff Burton with like his eyes scratched out and it says, "Die, I hate you." And so it all tied in together with the box. And then the Ouija board was there. Now for the Ouija board itself, I actually I don't do anything. I don't use gimmicks Ouija boards. I have people just come up, put their fingers on the planchette and let it do its thing. It works through suggestion. There's no need to do anything more, so I don't gimmick it. And then the next thing that I did, the next part was the moving planchette. That was using loops. I'm sure you guys are all familiar with loops, the little elastic loop around your wrist. It works beautifully well. You can put it around the leg. I actually did it while people still had their fingers on the planchette. Then I had them move away. And of course, as I move my hands away, I'm not touching and it's not pulling yet, and I can pull back and the thing moved, and it doesn't have to move much. Awesome response. Card in box, what that was is basically that's fine, it's not a big deal. I don't even need it.
It's
okay.
there.
What that was, it's not even necessarily a card in a box. This is, again, an early set list, and I changed it to use shacks and flap envelope to basically leave a message like spirit slates. Spirit slates would be totally out of place when you're talking about 1980s heavy metal, so I didn't want to do that, but I like the idea. So, you know, it's just the slip of paper and the envelope, and we'll see if there's a message left. And in fact, I do that in my ghost shows that I do on the ghost tours. And then finally, the thing I have is bell. I changed that. It's not a bell. But I've got the Hobbs box, so you know any electromagnetic coil box will work. And if you go in a lot of shops, they have the little Jesus statues that stick on your dash. They're magnetic. Oh, a Hobbs box will throw a Jesus statue. So, yeah. Now here's the thing, though. Here's the thing. That show at Vino's, Sarah was there, my girlfriend, and she had the remote for the Hobbs box. The damn thing didn't work because the battery of the remote died. I checked everything else, but not the remote battery. So the one thing I would say with that is always have your backup, because my extra out, you know, we did the eyes closed, join the hands, the chant for the kid to leave a message, but at least in the shacks and flap envelope, there was still a message from him. Of course, every other time I've used the Hobbs box to throw the Jesus, there's never been an issue. So anyway. That's kind of the rundown of the seance, and I wanted to leave some time to see if you guys have questions about any of this, anything about the marketing, the creation of it, or anything generally.
I think it's fantastic how you recontextualize the traditionally Victorian era thing, completely recontextualize it, which that changes the game. Yeah. Because context is key.
Yeah, and I didn't want to do Victorian stuff. I mean, I do ghost tours, and I feel like I'm somewhat already trapped in. It's not, yeah, it is Victorian, actually. I feel like I'm already kind of trapped in that. So I wanted to do something outside of that completely. But I mean, I love Seance, and I love metal. So why not put them together?
Yeah. Great.
Yeah.
Yeah, I often wondered about backwards lyrics.
Right.
There seems to be a conflict, because if you say something backwards, you're getting the opposite effect.
Right.
Prayer backwards is a bad thing.
Sure.
So if you say worship Satan backwards,
then that's worshiping God, right? Right. I like that. I never thought about that. That's an excellent point. It's fun. Yeah. Yes.
What do you do with the Ouija board?
So all I did with the Ouija board, that was the start of calling on the spirit to make its presence known. You know, where each, I guess I should have gone into that instead of kind of a list of routines. Each routine we did in the seance proper is calling a little bit more, pushing a little bit more for the spirit to make himself known. So all I did was have the people, you know, with their fingers on the planchette. I'm actually done with that, Daniel, so it doesn't matter. I just had the people put their fingers on the planchette and is the spirit here? Can someone give us a sign? Is someone here? And of course it moves to yes, because they want a spirit to be there. I didn't do anything, though. So it's truly hands-off. Same thing with the pendulum and the bottle. I don't touch the table. They do it. So I like to stay hands-off, and that one was actually years ago a friend at a show who said, be cool if you did that without touching the table, and I went, I can. So yeah, you learn.
Do you have anything like apport or anything that appears or anything like that at the end for that?
No, I didn't know apparition. What I wanted to do is, again, have Jesus go flying, but, you know, you do what you can. So, yes?
Do you have any issues with having heavy metal fans coming and recognizing that wasn't a real band?
No, I didn't. And you know, I say I get really bogged down in details. There's a place called Encyclopedia Metallicum or something like that that's online. And do you know how hard it is to find a metal band name that sounds evil that hasn't been used already? So yeah, I was afraid that if I used a real band name, even if it's an obscure one, that would happen, where they would look at the picture and go, no, that's actually, and I was a little bit concerned because that was like, that was Deicide, and I didn't know if anyone would recognize a picture of Deicide from the 80s and call me out on it, but no one did. Yeah, anyone else? Yeah.
What really made you do the seance, and was it Satan?
No, it was not Satan. And I covered that at the start. I did it because it was really a reconnection with my childhood, and because a friend said, what can you do in a metal club?
It was Cindy Lauper.
So yeah, and it was, yeah, Cindy Lauper made me do it. Yeah. No, that was just the masturbation. If you're not familiar, She Bop was her song. Right, they got her on the banned list, or the dirty list, because it's about masturbation. Oh my God. Any other questions? Yeah, oh, sorry. So yeah, I do use music. So like I say, I wanted to set up the proper kind of feel on the front end. So I picked all music that was from that time era, most of which was on the banned list, or you know, the most evil of the metal bands. So I picked that music, and then yeah, as the seance goes on, I do use music, but I don't like using, I know it sounds like you should use like metal music, but I think that's too distracting when you're trying to do the seance portion itself. So I used much softer, quieter background music. But yes, I did have music playing as well, especially during, not during the psychic test portion, but during the seance portion, yes. And I don't like turning it on at a certain, like waiting till the end, because I think it's also distracting. Just me personally. I think it stands out, and I don't want it to stand out. I want it to be background. You know, I want it to contribute, help the feel you're trying to get, but I think if it starts suddenly, it just seems odd to me. That's just me. Yeah?
Were there licensing issues with the music?
Probably, if I would have gotten caught, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I say that, but I'm in a metal club. I'm sure that they have the license, most likely, but frankly, I didn't ask. So, yeah. Any other questions? Yeah, I know I'm a lawyer, I shouldn't do that, but.
How many times have you done it just once, or just?
Yeah, I just did it the one time. After that, they asked me if I wanted to come back, but they were trying to book it during Halloween, and I can't. I'm too booked during Halloween to do it. So they said come back and do it again, so it's probably a good time to follow up and say, when do you want to do it? And other question, and then I've taken lots of these pieces now and just put them in my ghost tours. I do ghost tours, and on Wednesday nights we do one called Booze and Brews, where we go and do seance work. So a lot of these pieces have been worked a whole lot. Yeah.
Isn't there like the curse of 27 with music players? Like a lot of musicians have died on the 27th year. Was it 27, 20 years?
Yeah. Jimi Hendrix, Janis Joplin. Yeah, there's a whole list of people. Yeah, absolutely.
I think it's a cool idea as well.
Yeah, I mean, that's something people could run with. Yeah, absolutely. Any other questions? Yeah.
How many people did you end up doing the seance for overall? I know you said you had 6 at the table. What was the room full with?
Probably about 30.
Yeah, about 30.
And with your design of the way you did the seance, would you feel
comfortable with having a room with more people in it? Could you scale this up? Would you have the desire to scale it up?
I would scale it up, but I think I would stop it at around 50 or so. But because of the fact that we could do, I didn't do anything slight sensitive, so it was very much like almost obviously not completely surrounded because my back was to the stage, but they were. Imagine if this was the stage and I was down here. I mean, the tables were basically all the way around. So I wouldn't want people to be too far back. I mean, I really think if you're going to do a seance like this, like most seances, if you're not doing a ghost show, I think you need that intimacy to make it seem real. So I wouldn't want it too big. I didn't want to be on a stage. I wouldn't want to do it from a stage.
I think that it also varies a little bit with how many people you can have, where you're doing it. Like this little thing, there's so many people that want to see what's going on with the Ouija board and everything that the venue that he was at for this one, a lot of people were standing up, getting up from their tables, trying to crowd forward, and that made other people do it. But then the other time that we did it upstairs at
Fort Quarter,
he, got started. There was a whole lot of people up there, and I don't remember if you asked who wanted to do it or if you just selected.
No, those were VIPs who purchased the ticket.
Okay,
that's yeah.
So, and that's another really good thing, sell those tickets to people that can sit at the table, and so that actually was great because he was sitting at a table, and everybody else could then kind of like crowd around, and that worked out. There was probably about the same amount of people there as there was the other one, but I felt like so many other people could see all the little things.
Yeah, I mean, room layout obviously is key for anything. I mean, I've had rooms with 50 people that it was too many in a room, but this place, Vino's, where I perform, and they have pretty big bands come through there, so you could fit 600 people in that room probably, but I wouldn't want to. No, I wanted to keep them very up close and very, very on top of me. I didn't use any sound amplification for it. That was purposeful too, because I didn't want it to seem like the show. I did use music, but it's a metal club. Of course they have music. But yeah, I wanted that personal, intimate feel. Any other questions? If not, then we're actually done a little bit early.
Yay!
All right, thank you guys.